Tashirilek and welcome to Tibet This Week, where we bring you weekly news updates on Tibet, His Holiness the Dalai Lama and Central Tibetan Administration. Let's have a look at today's headlines. Sikyong Tsering calls on China to reconsider development policies in Tibet following earthquake. Sikyong and the Speaker congratulates Mike Johnson on re-election as Speaker of the U.S. House of Representatives. Sikyong expresses deep sadness over demise of former U.S. President Jimmy Carter on state funeral. Education Kalon attends inaugural of 17th Annual School Heads Meeting of Sambhota Tibetan Schools Society. Security Kalon discusses critical situation in Tibet with Tibet support groups in Germany and Switzerland. Scottish Parliament acknowledges role of Tibetan representatives of Office of Tibet, London. Department of Religion and Culture hosts second Consortium conference on Tibetan Digital Library in Dharamshala. Tibetan communities gathered to pray for victims of Dingri earthquake. On January 12, Sikyong Tsering of the Central Tibetan Administration issued a statement addressing the devastating 7.1 magnitude earthquake that struck Dingri County in Shikatse, Tibet and surrounding areas, expressing deep sorrow for the loss of lives and casualties. In the statement, Sikyong thanked the international community for their support and highlighted the resilience of local Tibetan efforts in providing aid and called on China to ensure transparency in relief efforts, allow international aid access and reconsider development policies that may heighten seismic risk. It also urged respect for Tibetan cultural identity in media and official narratives, reaffirming Central Tibetan Administration's commitment to advocating for Tibetans' rights and dignity. Sikyong Tsering and the Speaker of the Tibetan Parliament in Exile of the Central Tibetan Administration wrote to Mike Johnson, congratulating him on his re-election as Speaker of the United States House of Representatives. Sikyong and the Speaker in their letter congratulate Speaker Mike Johnson and praised the U.S. Congress as an unwavering champion of the Tibetan cause, providing crucial bipartisan support for decades. Both the Sikyong and the Speaker said under his leadership, Tibetans look forward to continue critical work towards resolving the Sino-Tibet conflict based on the middle way approach through a negotiated dialogue. On January 9, a state funeral was held at the National Cathedral in Washington, D.C., honoring former U.S. President Jimmy Carter, who passed away last month at the age of 100. Renowned for his advocacy of human rights, Carter was one of the first U.S. leaders to acknowledge human rights abuses in Tibet and maintained a close friendship with His Holiness the Dalai Lama. His Holiness expressed gratitude for Carter's efforts to alleviate Tibetan suffering, while Sikyong Tsering described him as a principled leader dedicated to peace, justice and human rights. The Central Tibetan Administration held a prayer service on December 30, 2024 in his memory, closing offices that afternoon to pay tribute. Kalon Changra of the Department of Education of the Central Tibetan Administration attended the opening ceremony of the 17th Annual School Heads Meeting of Sambhota Tibetan Schools Society in Dharamshala on 10th January. The Education Minister Changra, during her address, highlighted on the issue of Tibetan students' gradual decline in linguistic proficiency as they progress through grades. Kalon acknowledged the complex challenges involved in preserving and promoting Tibetan cultural heritage, especially the Tibetan language. The three-day meeting was attended by 29 school heads to thoroughly deliberate on improving Tibetan language standards among Sambhota Tibetan Schools Society students and to promote an outcome-focused education system. Reviewing progress on the past resolutions, eliminating punitive and reward-based assessment methods, standardizing examinations across members' schools, improving Tibetan language proficiencies in grade 6 to 8, and implementing resolutions from the 8th Tibetan General Conference on Education were the key agendas. On January 10th, Security Kalon met with the members of the Westerwald Tibet Support Group Germany, who reaffirmed their support for Tibet. Kalon thanked German Free Democratic Party MP Sandra Visser for her unwavering support and discussed Tibet's critical issues, including self-immolation, Sino-Tibetan dialogue, and challenges faced by the Tibetan refugees. The group announced plans to mark Tibetan Flag Day on 10 March by raising flags at 500 locations across Germany. In Frankfurt, Kalon attended a prayer service for earthquake victims in Dingri area of Shikatse and met with leaders including Thösam Rinpoche, Dr. Carsten Klein of the Frederick Naumann Foundation and Kai Müller of the ICT Germany. Following engagements in Germany, Kalon visited Geneva, Switzerland, meeting U.S. Ambassador Michelle Taylor, International Court of Justice officials and Lutheran World Federation leaders to express gratitude for their support of Tibetan refugees. She also addressed students at the Tibetan language school. The Scottish Parliament published a motion by Rose Gare, MSP and chair of the cross-party group for Tibet, recognizing the contributions of outgoing Representative Sonam Tsering Farsi and welcoming his successor, Representative Tsering Yangki. The motion highlights Farsi's decades of service, including his role as an elected Tibetan parliamentarian and negotiator with China, and appreciates his engagement with the Tibetan community in Scotland. The motion, supported by 9 MSPs, reflects hopes for continued strong ties between Scotland and Tibet under Representative Tsering Yangki's tenure. This week, the Department of Religion and Culture, Central Tibetan Administration, held the second Consortium conference on the Tibetan Digital Library in collaboration with Wadhwani AI and Melam ITRC. The event saw 58 participants from various monasteries and cultural institutions, was graced by officials from USAID, Melam AI and the Buddhist Digital Resource Center. Secretary Dundul Dorje emphasized the Tibetan Digital Library's role in preserving cultural heritage through secure digital archiving of manuscripts, tankas, and other artifacts. He highlighted the program Strengthening Cultural Resilience of Tibetan Communities, launched by Sikyong in November 2023. USAID's Radharani Thakuria praised the initiative, calling monasteries the custodians of Tibetan culture and stressing the library's importance for future generations. The conference featured presentations on the project's progress, budget plans, and the library's catalog system, alongside hands-on sessions demonstrating text, digitization, and AI applications for preservation. Highlights included demonstrations by Wadhwani AI and Melam AI and discussions on preserving ancient texts. In the wake of devastating earthquake that struck Tibet's Dingri region on January 7, 2025, Tibetan communities worldwide have united in grief and solidarity. Prayer services were held across Nepal, India, Bhutan, Australia, New Zealand, Belgium, Taiwan and other regions to honor the victims and offer support to those affected. In Nepal, the Tibetan community gathered at Chelka Chödwe Gandhi Leksheling Monastery on January 11th, organized by the Tibetan Refugee Welfare Office. The event brought together 167 representatives from 47 Tibetan organizations and institutions, along with dignitaries such as Representative Tsebrilubun Tulku Ngawang Chokdup, Tibetan Parliamentarian Tashi Tundup, and other leaders. Addressing the gathering, Representative Ngawang Chokdup emphasized the unity and compassion exemplified by Tibetans globally, urging solidarity during these trying times. Similarly, prayer services were held in Tibetan settlements across India, Bhutan, Australia, and New Zealand. Communities gathered in monasteries and dharma centers to mourn the loss of over 126 lives and pray for the recovery of the injured. In Belgium, services in Antwerp and Brussels, organized by the Tibetan associations, included symbolic gestures such as postponing the Dome Losa celebrations in respect for the victims. Meanwhile, in Taiwan, Tibetan and local supporters came together to light Buddha lamps and recite prayers, embodying the spirit of compassion and unity. These global prayer services not only expressed shared sorrow but also reaffirmed the resilience of the Tibetan community. Despite their separation from their homeland, Tibetans worldwide continue to uphold their cultural heritage and support each other in times of tragedy. On January 10, the Australian All-Party Parliamentary Group for Tibet, led by co-chair Susan Templeman, MP Senator Dean Smith and Senator Barbara Pocock, expressed condolences for the victims of the January 7th earthquake in Tibet, urging the Chinese government to ensure transparency and prioritize aid without undermining Tibetan rights and culture. Dr. Sophie Scamps, MP, echoed the call for an Australian response, emphasising the need for open sharing of information to facilitate effective international assistance for the vulnerable Tibetan community. That is all the news for this week's edition of Tibet This Week. Thank you so much for watching.